Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening. It is day 95 of spiritual healthcare, and I am going to be introducing today a wonderful co-host. I cannot say enough about him. He has been brought up many times on many spiritual healthcare classes, and we are going to be introducing him very shortly. It is my honor to have him here because he's amazing. So good evening to all of you. And we've got lots to talk about tonight in regards to perception, in regards to just how we perceive the world, how we receive information, the frequencies that we see on all sorts of things. So good morning or good evening. This is going to take me a bit. To Mart and Kaz and Des and Patricia, nice to see you. Dan, nice to see you. Nice to see everybody logging in. It's good to see all of you. A little bit different doing this in the evening, but it's kind of nice. I hope some of you guys were able to catch Coast to Coast AM yesterday, or I guess this morning? Last night? I don't know. What do you want to... I don't know. Really late last night here. It was like 1 a.m. for me, but I had a blast on Coast to Coast last night. I was absolutely fantastic. Good morning to Lori. I'm going to say good morning because there's no way around this. Kaz is saying he almost typed morning. It is what it is. I don't know. It's a different time of day for everybody anyway. It's morning somewhere for someone, really, so good morning, good evening, happy day. All of those things. So I'm glad to see everybody. And as I say, I've got an amazing co-host this evening who is he's sitting here right now, and I'm going to introduce him just very shortly. He was really excited about the other I think just coming on. He's normally when I say I'm going out to do a show and stuff like that, usually it's his cue to know I'm going out for the evening, and so this is kind of nice that I get to actually stay put this evening and include him. So that would be super cool. So for those of you guys who don't know, the grand co-host tonight is Mr. Galen, my incredible Python, and he's like my right hand. I mean, which is such a pun because he has no hands, but there it is. But yeah, he's amazing, and I can't wait to introduce you guys to him. And he is such an amazing little man, and I'm really looking forward to you guys getting to know him and getting to meet him and things like that, because he's super cool, and he's like a superhero. Talk about perception of the world. Let me tell you, this, like, my little guy, I tell you, he has got perception like nobody else on the planet. It's incredible. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how perceiving things in the world is can really alter how we view things, what our filters are, all of those kind of things, because he's got some built-in filters that are pretty amazing. The one question that there was a question actually I really wanted to grab that pertained to last night's Coast to Coast AM. I had a blast last night on Coast to Coast. George Norrie was amazing. The producers were amazing. So professional. These guys have just so got it together, and I can't say enough about them. They were fantastic, and lots of people, of course, calling in. I've posted on the Entity Seeker Facebook page the link to the playback. So if you guys missed Coast to Coast last night, the link to the playback is now on the Entity Seeker Facebook page. And on entityseeker.ca in the media and video section as well. So you guys can go to entityseeker.ca, go to the interview section, media and video, and you'll find the link to the replay of Coast to Coast. So it was a blast. We talked a lot about frequencies and emotional states and mental health and stuff like that. And there was a question that actually came up in the comments in the chat that didn't really get addressed in the show, and I thought we could grab it here. And that was that does depression... the question was, does depression and the paranormal seem to be related into this field? And the person who had asked it had really hoped that we would address it on the show, and it just never came up. So I wanted to grab it here before I introduce Galen to you guys, because I thought it was very prevalent. And I think the answer to that is absolutely yes, first of all. depression is it's a chemical state of being, as well as an emotional state of being. Of course, there's neurochemistry that's going on with things like depression and stuff like that. So you've got a lot of changes that are going on within the body. And for anybody who's experienced depression or who has had it, it really does alter the filters in which you see the world. On a number of levels, and usually it very much hinders things. I was having a discussion actually this morning about just how detrimental depression and things like that will be to people who, for example, are healing, people who are dealing with chronic illness or cancer or anything like that. You get something like depression, and it literally starts to hinder your body, hinder the receptive cells, in terms of, how our bodies are receiving treatment, what our immune systems can tolerate and take, all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So it's such a massive factor. In terms of the paranormal, as soon as we get a factor that's entering into changing that's changing our perception, changing our emotional state, changing how we feel and where we are on that radio dial of emotions, we end up experiencing, of course, what is set on that radio dial. So if we're tuned into depression and upset, we get more events and people and entities and things like that end up reflecting back our state of being. So usually, when we get a case of a negative entity that's dealing with a person, the idea of that person being depressed or something going on within that person and trauma-wise, it often is the case. So does depression seem to be a factor? Yeah, it affects our emotional state, and therefore, we end up dealing with the repercussions of that. Marge is saying that she was blindsided by something so devastating that depression took over. Yeah, and it's like, and it can be brought on, of course, not only neurochemically, but it can be brought on by events, by post-traumatic stress disorder. All sorts of different things can end up happening that can trigger something as strong and as powerful as depression. And it really does start to change the way we look at the world. It can make us really paranoid. It can make us just tune out from that connection of to our core, to source, to all of that. So I keep looking down because I'm being paged down here, and I'm going to introduce without more delay because I'm getting poked at. So I am thrilled and honored to introduce my lovely co-host tonight. He is what they call a ball python or a royal python. He is 16 years old. He just turned 16 on June the 2nd, and he has been such an amazing. His name Galen means healer in Gaelic. So the idea of snake and things like that is really about the idea of healing. It's about shedding your skin. It's about presenting yourself in a new way to the world. And people often, think of snakes as something that are, terrifying and destructive. And in real life, that's just not the case at all. Throughout history, they have been a feeling and a symbol of healing and medicine. And I think, to me, he is the Zen master of all Zen masters because he has helped me through millions of things. So without further ado, everybody, this is my wonder. Gailey, come here, sweetheart. Come sit up. So this is Galen, everybody. Hey, Gailey, you say hi to the camera. This is my wonderful little guy. How are you doing? You doing okay? Yeah, you're co-hosting tonight. That's it. Yep. So this is my boy. As you can see, he's about 5 feet long. He's an absolutely amazing, as I say, amazing little man. See, sweetheart, look at all the people are commenting and sending you hearts. Hey, they're sending you hearts. But he is phenomenal, and I want to tell you guys a little bit about him because when we talk about things like our perception of the world, we often think that other people perceive information and the world in the same way that we do. We have a hard time imagining or fathoming the idea that somebody is perceiving something in a different way. If something is blue, it has to be blue to everybody. If something is moving, it must be moving to everybody. We have a really hard time when it comes to perception being rather empathetic to the idea that people perceive things in a different way. So when we're hearing about paranormal cases, for instance, when we're hearing about paranormal cases, oftentimes if it doesn't sound like what we think it should, we tend to dismiss it as either crazy or, whatever it is. We tend to disregard them, the witness or whatever, and we have to be really careful about that. And I use Galen often as a great teaching example because being a Python, his perception of the world is pretty incredible. He can see heat, for instance. He actually can see in thermal vision. And the neat thing about this is the fact that his ability to see in thermal vision can actually be switched on and off. And this is a really recent discovery by numerous biologists where they've realized that he can actually switch between his heat sensing vision and just regular vision, like you and I. Almost like if any of you have seen the Predator movies where he can switch on and off to the thermal camera, is something very similar to that. So how he ends up doing that, if you guys take a look at his face, if he will sit still, you can see those tiny little pits around his nose and mouth. You guys are about to get a snake lick. There you go. Welcome to my world. So you can see those tiny little pits. Gailey, can you sit still for just a sec? There you go. All in and around his lips. And those are actually heat sensing pits. So he's actually receiving information and his brain is translating that into an image. It's really quite incredible. Of course, he can taste smell. His tongue is going constantly all the time, that little flick of the tongue, because his tongue is picking up on these scent particles, and his tongue rubs against the roof of his mouth on something called the Jacobson's organ. And that Jacobson's organ, which is just the palate, the roof of his mouth, big yawn, my sweetheart. I know you're up early for this, and we appreciate it greatly. So that Jacobson's organ translates those scent particles into scent for him. So he doesn't smell through his nose; he just breathes through his nose. So he is absolutely amazing. One of the things that pythons are able to do, which blows my mind all the time, is that the speed in which they strike at their food, strike at their prey, is so fast that if you and I were to do it, if you and I were to strike at our food, if we did that, if we were to move our heads that quickly, instant brain damage. Instantaneous brain damage. We wouldn't make it. Now, pythons don't have a protective skull. They're not like a woodpecker where they've got a protective layer in their brain or anything like that. It's a real mystery as to how pythons are able to do what they do. So he really is. You're a superhero. Did you know that? You are. It's crazy. So this is but the point in which I'm trying to make with all of this is that Galen's perception of the world is vast. It's vastly different than ours. He can do what we do and then adds features on top of it that are phenomenal, that we can't even get our heads around. I mean, the ability to switch between two different modes of vision, that's pretty incredible. That is some superhero shit right there, if nothing else. So, to then turn around and discount his version of what he's seeing, it doesn't make any sense. He's not wrong. His perception is not wrong because he sees it different. It's just a different way of viewing the world. We see similar features, for example, with kids with autism. I've got very good friends who have an autistic son, and his version of the world, how he's perceiving information, is completely different, but it doesn't make it wrong. It's just a new way of seeing things. So I think it's something when we're looking at the paranormal, we have to understand that just because we see or we're perceiving something in some uncertain way doesn't necessarily mean that A, we're getting the entire truth or the entire picture, and B, somebody else might perceive the same thing and get a completely different image. It's really wild. Marge is asking, what's his favorite meal? Mice. But here's the kicker to that question. If he could pick, Galen, one of Galen's favorite pastimes is cooking. He loves to be in the kitchen. Just loves domestic stuff. Loves to be in the kitchen, and he loves the smell of everything from chicken to peppers and frying in frying pan, all sorts of stuff. Like he's really into those baking smells and things like that. Shadow and Brandy, they were so kind, and they made us this amazing candle that smelled like blueberry pancakes, and he thought that was fantastic. So he loves the smell, but he won't eat anything that's not a mouse. So his instinct is saying you gotta eat mice, but his urban brain is saying I want chicken on a platter. So it's what happens when they're spoiled. But yeah, so it's really interesting, and I think as we kind of move forward into the world, and of course we're seeing these different examples of perception and different experiences, not only in things like remote viewing, for instance, where people can turn around and get various versions of images, but also in mediumship. And it's really intriguing how our brains will translate this different information. So I think one of the prime examples of this is an investigator that I work with. His name's Matt Spearin, and I worked with him for it's close, almost 20 years. It's got to be close to 20 years now. And he has an amazing way of perceiving images and thought forms in a space. So where some mediums, for example, will walk in and see a direct image or a direct representation of something that's actually happened, Matt will perceive it in symbols. So he will end up perceiving it in symbology, such as like storybook images and things like that. So he doesn't necessarily translate it in the same way that you would translate something, for example, like the image or a face of a person. He's deadly accurate with names and dates and all sorts of things like that. He blows my mind every time we're out. But interestingly enough, he sees everything in a very specific way. It's pretty cool. Arnold is saying 20 years. I don't look over 25. Thank you. That's awesome. That's what I want to hear. Galen's 16, so I mean, look at him. He's looking amazing for his age, right? Snakes ball pythons anyway, can live into their 50s, so he's got a long way to go. He is still a teenager, and he has not yet asked me for a car. So that's like a big bonus. People say, why do you have a snake? Because they don't ask you for a car on their 16th birthday. You have not yet. So yeah. So Suzette's asking, if you've had a paranormal experience, do you see things differently? I've had several paranormal experiences and I see it different. That's really an interesting question. I think it can. I think when our eyes are opened to certain events, a couple of things change. One of the things that changes is our state of expectation. We begin to realize that more things are possible. So oftentimes when people have one paranormal experience, they will end up having quite a few more throughout their life. And it's really quite incredible. So yeah, I think we do. I think it changes our view of the world. And I think once our view of the world and our paradigms shift, then it opens us up to new experiences and new sights and sounds and and new frequencies, all sorts of things. So yeah, I do. I think absolutely. For me, what's so interesting about Galen and many other animals that not only have I lived with, but also animals that have been reported and whatnot over the years, is that they see the paranormal in a different way too. Galen has had some really interesting experiences. I wish he could personally relate them, but I will relate them on his behalf. We used to have his first encounter with anything paranormal was an actual physical orb that was in the space, and it was a really interesting moment. The two of us were standing. He had a tank at the time, and we were standing beside his terrarium, and we noticed that there was this bright little orb that was about this big. It appeared about 2 feet from the ceiling, And both of us watched it drift down in front of us. It wasn't moving quickly at all. And it drifted down in front of us. It was about, I don't know, maybe 2 feet from us at the time. And Galen saw it as well. And he looked at me and he looked at the orb and he watched this thing. And then it got up just, I don't know, a little lower than my shoulder and it disappeared. But he was thrilled and he was very interested in it. He's never been taught to be fearful of this stuff. So he was very intrigued. Now, on the flip side of this, because he's had a number of really fun encounters, he'd had one encounter not long after Stephanie had passed away, where there was my co-founder of Entity Seeker was Stephanie Wertz. After she passed away, I had a visitation from an entity that was not so friendly. It never did anything. Nothing. It never amounted to anything. But Galen, interestingly enough, I think actually saw it, and his response to it was very intriguing. We were playing in the bedroom upstairs, and he was having a really good time. He was playing around, having fun, and all of a sudden he coiled up like a little rattlesnake, got very, very upset, and let out this low hiss. And of course, you guys don't know Galen, but honest to God, it is such a strange behavior for him. Such a strange behavior for him that it took me right aback, because I can count on one hand the number of times I have ever heard this boy hiss, ever. He just doesn't. He just doesn't. He's just really secure, and he's very balanced. He's very chilled out. I trust him with everything. Right? We trust you. Yeah. And he got into this coil and started to low hiss. And what was interesting was that when I moved out of the way, I realized that he was actually looking over my shoulder. And when I picked him up, his attention didn't move off of something that looked about, I don't know, 2 to 3 feet off the ground. I couldn't see anything. He could see it. And he held his ground as he should have, and what I ended up doing was just basically backing up that energy. He wasn't panicked, he wasn't freaked out, he was completely in his own center. He knew what to do, he knew how to set that boundary. He set the boundary, I backed him up with it, and whatever it was disappeared, and he looked around, looked for it as if it had vanished, and we never ever saw it again. It was a really interesting experience. And what fascinated me the most about that experience was the fact that he seemed to innately know how to deal with it. And that to me was very intriguing. It taught me a lot about this research and about paranormal activity, because when we're dealing with negative entities, we don't want to get outside of our center. And, we always want to make sure we're setting the boundary. Everything we've talked about in spiritual healthcare, we can set those rules, set those boundaries with our energy. Doesn't have to be with our words, it has to be with our energy first. And he did it absolutely perfectly. It was hello. Thank you very much for that. That was lovely. Thank you so much. So but yeah, so it was a really interesting experience. It's the only time that's ever happened. One of the most intriguing experiences that has been a consistent thing over the time that I've had Galen, which is the full 16 years, has been the recurrent visitation of my dad coming and visiting him and checking in. So this is the coolest thing. I started to notice this a number of years ago, where Galen has got a very specific greeting for people that he knows. The family members that he is familiar with, he has a very specific greeting. It's very excited and it's very happy. And he only does it when he's greeting somebody that he really likes. And I started to notice him following something in the room. It was in the living room. And I started to notice him following it, and I couldn't break his attention from it. He was just absolutely focused. And lo and behold, he actually started to do his greeting to whatever it was. I still couldn't see a thing. And he was greeting whoever it was, very excited, looking at me, expecting me to, do something as well. And I just told him, I said, Mommy can't see it. Mommy can't see it. You go ahead. Mommy can't see it. And the interaction, he sat up and he was interacting as if he wanted whoever it was to pick him up. He was just ecstatic to see this person And then all of a sudden, this lasted for a good 15 minutes, and then whoever it was seemed to disappear, and he was looking around as if he couldn't figure out where they went, and then seemed to move on with his day. So this has now happened multiple times over the years. About once every 6 months or so, we seem to get a visitation by someone. And the last time it happened, I have a sort of a photo wall of all sorts of different people and whatnot in my room. And I took him to the photo wall, and I asked him, because he's extremely responsive with question and answer and things like that. One of the big misconceptions about pythons is that they're deaf because they don't have outer ears. It's not true at all. He can hear a lot of different frequencies. And I took him to the photo wall, and I said, who was that? Who was it? And out of all the pictures, there's probably a good 15 people on my wall. He immediately, it took him 2 seconds, and he pointed at a picture of my dad. It's the only picture on the wall. But it was without hesitation. So it was a really cool experience. So I've got no reason to believe that it's someone else. It's someone he really liked, obviously, and was very intrigued by. He's never been frightened of it, but he's got a really good bead and good balance of understanding this amazing energy, and he is absolutely somebody to learn from, because he's fascinated right now with my keyboard. He really wants to sit there. That's where he keeps going. But yeah, it's so interesting because we can learn from animals and things like that in regards to this stuff, because they don't have the tapes, they don't have the beliefs or religious beliefs and things like that start to taint our perception about the paranormal or about spirits or death or anything like that. So I think that there is so much we can learn, and we just simply don't give not only reptiles but just animals in general the credit that they deserve, just because they are perceiving the world in a different way. Definitely doesn't mean that it is a sign of a lesser perception, and we just have so much to learn from these little beings. And of course, snakes get a terrible rap, a really terrible rap. And let me tell you, I have been bitten by cats, I have been bitten by a dog, I've been bitten by mice. I have never been bitten by this boy. So 16 years and counting. That's pretty good. But yeah, I trust him with everything. He's absolutely amazing. I definitely encourage anybody who has had a fear of snakes, if you want to get over it, is find somebody that has a ball python, because and especially one that's been loved on a lot, because it'll change the perception of snakes for sure. The other thing that I wanted to add, which is pretty cool, which is a little bit of a Galen fact, but it's also an entity seeker fact as well. Since Galen has sort of made various appearances with entity seeker and whatnot, and as I say, I bring him up in classes and things like that all the time, because he's just a prime example of what we talk about. He has inspired adoptions of snakes and whatnot all over the world. When the floods and whatnot hit in Louisiana, when there's been earthquakes and whatnot in the States, and different tragedies, here, there, and everywhere that there's been a disaster, people have gone out to their rescue shelters, and people that have been fans of Entity Seeker and things like that, and they have gone out of the shelters. It's really phenomenal. So he has been a phenomenal inspiration to some pretty phenomenal individuals that have really taken it upon themselves to do a lot in his name as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So that being said, everybody, we got to do our affirmations. This is gonna be an interesting round of affirmations, I think. But Galen, come here. Yeah, we're gonna read through these. All right? Okay. So everybody take a breath. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself and who I am. I recognize and am grateful for the abundance that is constantly flowing into my life, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining and tending to my connection with Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. And at this moment, all is well. I am able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. I can see and appreciate all the beauty and abundance of life around me. And I am able to embrace love while letting go of fear. And I find peace, the soothing silence of my inner being. Everybody take a breath. Thank you guys so much for this incredible evening and very different evening of spiritual healthcare. And thank you, Galen. Thank you, Galen, for hanging out, even though I know you so bad want to climb up my desk and it's driving you nuts. So thank you for your patience. But anyway, thank you guys for switching the times around so that he could come and participate with all of this. This will definitely not be the last time that he will be hanging out and joining in, because he is just a wonderful little co-host. Even though his attention is in 50 other places at once, right? You run in every direction at one time. And yeah, he will definitely be back. And thank you guys so much for the wonderful, warm reception to this little boy, because he is, as I say, he is amazing. And I am so grateful every day to have him in my life. And he is just, as I say, he has brought years of laughter and joy, and will continue to do so throughout the years. He's a good boy. So anyway, everybody, I will see you back on Monday morning, Spiritual Healthcare at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. We will switch back to our mornings, and we will see you guys 10 a.m. Mountain Time, Monday morning, again for Spiritual Healthcare Day 96. So that's going to be pretty awesome. Oh, there is a brand new fire video, both on the Entity Seeker Facebook page, as well as the YouTube channel as well. And it's called Teaching Non-Resistance with Fire. So check that one out. I talk about flow, what it is to get into your connection, and how I myself use fire to do that. This guy is also another brilliant way to do that as well. Snakes are just the masters of Zen, but animals just in general. Let me tell you, you want to get into your connection? It's how you do it. It's totally how you do it. Thank you guys, and I will see you all Monday morning. Have an amazing weekend. Bye, guys.